Welcome to the Deep Dive. We got a stack of sources today, shared by our listener, and they really paint a picture of global tension. It seems like boundaries, military, political, judicial, they're all being tested, maybe even broken, all at once.
That's right.
Our mission here is to try and cut through some of that noise, synthesize these reports, and give you clear takeaways. We're looking at four critical flashpoints. The war in Ukraine, a brewing political crisis in the U.S., a landmark justice verdict for Sudan, and some really aggressive rhetoric between Beijing and Taiwan.
Exactly. We're aiming to connect the dots for you. We have kinetic conflict, these dueling military stories, and maybe most importantly, a dangerous shift in what's considered acceptable political talk, both at home and, internationally.
Okay, so let's start where the fighting is most immediate. Ukraine. The sources detail, another night of heavy air attacks.
Yeah.
Seems pretty clear what Moscow's strategic focus is.
Yeah.
Ukrainian reports are saying 183 drones launched overnight. Their Air Force claims they intercepted 154. That sounds like a high success rate, but...
It is. But the ones that get through, they still cause devastating damage.
Right.
And that damage consistently hits energy and civilian infrastructure. That tells you a lot about the strategy, especially, with winter coming. Reports from places like Kherson and Donetsk confirm the human cost, again, at least 5 civilians killed, 37 injured.
And the energy grid seems key here.
Absolutely critical. For instance, DTEK, that's Ukraine's biggest private energy company, they reported serious damage to one of their thermal power plants. 2 workers injured there, too. This isn't just about military capacity. It's about making life unbearable for civilians as it gets colder.
Okay, but we always have to remember, wartime reports are part of the narrative strategy on both sides.
Yeah.
So if that's the Ukrainian view, what's the story coming from the Russian Ministry of Defense?
Well, the Russian MOD's claims seem designed to project 2 things. Success on the ground locally and the failure of Western support for Ukraine. They claim their forces liberated a settlement called Novahorivka in Zaporizhia.
Liberated.
Yeah. But what's maybe more telling is the level of detail they give about destroying Western equipment. They don't just say artillery. They claim 1 tank, 19 armored vehicles, and they name specific U.S. models like HMMWVs and Max Pros, plus exactly 20 artillery pieces.
20 specific pieces.
Yes, and they list the origins. U.S. M777, 2 German PZH-2000s, a French Caesar, a Polish Crab, all 155mm systems.
Wow, it's like they're sending an itemized receipt directly to NATO. Why be so granular?
Exactly. It's likely not just military bookkeeping. If you think about the bigger picture, naming the U.S., Germany, France, Poland, it's probably meant to have a political effect, too, to maybe demoralize those nations, providing aid or fuel debates in those countries about the cost and effectiveness of helping Ukraine. It feeds a specific narrative back to the West.
Okay, and they also claimed other successes.
Yes, they mentioned hitting 141 targets, things like a military personnel train, a railway substation, and workshops for drone assembly and storage. And defensively, a huge claim, shooting down 218 Ukrainian drones, 4 U.S. HIMARS rockets, and 2 guided bombs. They're painting a picture of being effective on both offense and defense.
A picture of control, really, which I suppose leads us to President Putin's own assessment recently.
It does. He claimed Russian forces took almost 5,000 square kilometers of territory just in 2025. For context, that's roughly 1% of Ukraine's total land area.
And he said Russia now holds the strategic initiative. How does that claim stack up against, the reality on the ground, or at least Kyiv's counter-narrative?
Well, Ukrainian officials call these recent Russian offensives a failure. They point out Moscow hasn't captured any major city this year, and they maintain their own troops have made some, albeit limited, advances in places like Donetsk and Sumy. It's really a conflict where success itself is fiercely contested, and the public statements are just as much a battleground.
Okay, let's transition now. Because this theme of aggressive talk and shifting norms, it's not just on the battlefield. It seems to be escalating dramatically in U.S. domestic politics, too. We're seeing moves from just political disagreement to actually demanding opponents be punished legally.
Yeah, what's really striking here is how political fights are being deliberately framed as potential legal issues, really testing the boundaries of democratic norms. Former President Trump publicly called for the arrest, the imprisonment of 2 prominent Democrats, Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson and Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker.
And he gave a specific reason for this.
He did. Trump accused them of failing to protect ICE agents' immigration and customs enforcement. He directly linked their opposition to his immigration policies, specifically their resistance to deploying the National Guard, to what he essentially called a criminal failure of duty. He actually said the mayor of Chicago should be in jail, Governor Pritzker too. It looks like an attempt to use the justice system, or the threat of it, purely as a political weapon.
And Mayor Johnson's situation is key here, right? He signed that order creating an ICE-free zone in Chicago properties.
That's the context. Johnson's response to Trump mentioned the former president's history of, in his view, unfairly targeting black men.
And Governor Pritzker, he seemed to see a bigger danger here.
He did. Pritzker didn't just rebut the specific accusation, he sort of raised the alarm about American democracy itself. He asked, essentially, if political opponents can be threatened with jail when they haven't committed a crime, what else is missing on the path to total authoritarianism?
And we should be clear, neither official has been charged with anything. This is political rhetoric right now. But it's happening while there's real friction. Texas National Guard troops near Chicago despite local objections, and the Trump administration's Justice Department investigating other critics, like former FBI Director James Comey, on charges some analysts call legally weak.
It suggests a pattern, perhaps, of using judicial and even quasi-military pressure against political opposition. And seeing that deliberate chipping away at norms, well, it gives us a lens for our next point. A major moment of accountability over at the International Criminal Court in The Hague.
Right, after decades, a measure of international justice for crimes committed way back in the 2000s in Darfur, Sudan.
This verdict is truly historic. It's the very first conviction by the ICC for the horrific violence in Darfur. The man convicted is Ali Abdel-Rahman, known as Ali Kushab. He was a key leader of the Janjaweed militia. He's about 75 now.
The charges were extensive.
He was found guilty on 27 counts: mass murder, rape, torture, insurrection. It's justice that's been delayed for a very long time, but it's finally been delivered.
The details that came out in court, described by the judge, Joanna Corner, they were just harrowing. They really emphasized the brutality.
Absolutely. Testimony described how Rahman's forces rounded up about 50 civilians, put them on trucks, beat some with pickaxes, and then he personally ordered soldiers to shoot them. The judge made a point of saying this wasn't just a commander giving orders from afar. Rahman was physically involved in the violence.
And just to remind everyone of the scale of that conflict, the Darfur War back in the 2000s pitted non-Arab tribes against the Khartoum government, which armed and supported the Janjaweed. The UN estimated something like 300,000 people were killed and maybe 2.5 million displaced.
Yeah, a massive tragedy. And the timing of this conviction is profoundly significant. Rahman was an ally of the former Sudanese president Omar al-Bashir, who was also wanted by the ICC for genocide, but has never faced trial.
Right.
But maybe even more critically, this verdict comes while Sudan is currently engulfed in a new civil war, a devastating one. And this current war involves the Sudanese army fighting the RSF, the Rapid Support Forces. The RSF is a powerful paramilitary group that is, in fact, the direct successor to the old Janjaweed.
Wow. So the perpetrators today are linked to those from 20 years ago.
Directly. So this conviction, even decades later, serves as a kind of moral and historical mirror to those fueling the violence in Sudan right now. It sets a crucial precedent for accountability, even as the cycle of violence continues.
A stark reminder, yeah, that today's conflicts often have deep roots in past atrocities. Okay, our final flashpoint takes us to Asia, and we're back to that theme of weaponized, aggressive language. Beijing has launched this verbal attack on Taiwan's President Ching-te that's just shocking in its hostility.
The trigger seems to have been an interview Lai gave to a conservative U.S. radio host. In it, Lai praised former President Trump and, crucially, suggested Trump deserved the Nobel Peace Prize if he could persuade Xi Jinping to give up the idea of using force against Taiwan. That was clearly a provocative statement.
You could say that.
Yeah.
But the response from China's Taiwan Affairs Office wasn't just disagreement. It was extraordinarily harsh.
It went way beyond policy. It became pure character assassination. They called Lai a crisis maker, a peace destroyer. But it's the metaphors they use that are almost unheard of in official state communications.
What do they say specifically?
They accused Lai of unprincipled foreign flattery, of squandering the flesh and blood of the people, and then came this incredibly aggressive phrase. They accused him of prostituting himself and joining foreign forces.
Prostituting himself. That's unbelievable language from an official body.
Using that specific word to describe the sitting president of a territory they claim, it's a deliberate attempt to completely delegitimize him, to signal absolute contempt, visceral contempt.
So if we try to analyze the strategy there, it's not just anger. It's designed to be maximally offensive. What's the signal?
It signals, I think, a complete breakdown of any pretense of dialogue or respect. And it strongly reinforces the threat of force. They ended the statement by calling Lai and Taiwan's independent supporters ants trying to shake a tree, saying they'll eventually be swept into the trash can of history.
And the timing is important too, right?
Absolutely vital. This came just 2 days before Lai's major National Day speech. And you'll remember, China held huge war games around Taiwan after that same speech last year. So this kind of rhetoric is always shattered by the potential for real military action.
And the core issue hasn't changed. Lai's government insists that the Republic of China, Taiwan, and the People's Republic of China are not subordinate to each other. Beijing sees that as pure separatism.
Exactly. The rhetoric here feels almost as high stakes as the conflicting claims back in Ukraine. It really shows how, in these critical face-offs, diplomatic language is just being thrown out the window in favor of these personalized aggressive insults designed purely to escalate tension and belittle the opponent.
Which brings us back, I think, to the thread connecting all four of these areas. Whether it's the actual fighting in Ukraine, that long-awaited justice in Sudan, the testing of democratic limits with jail threats in the U.S., or this calculated verbal assault on Taiwan, the common factor seems to be this profound sense of heightened tension and the deliberate crossing of established lines. Norms, military, legal, rhetorical dialogues, they all seem to be under pressure or just being discarded.
And that really raises a final, maybe provocative thought for you, the listener, to consider. When you look at the sheer intensity of these verbal attacks, the demands for jail in U.S. politics, the official use of insults like prostituting between China and Taiwan, does it suggest that maybe extreme, highly emotional rhetoric is fast becoming the most effective and therefore maybe the most dangerous new weapon in both international and domestic political conflicts? When real dialogue breaks down, perhaps the vocabulary of contempt becomes the primary tool.
A really compelling point to think about as you process all this. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. We'll see you next time.